Hey, it's Jess. Welcome back. Today I'm here with another Way Back Wednesday where I will be talking about all the books that I read in February of 2023. Looking at my Goodreads, I read a total of 5 books this month. All of them were new, none of them were rereads. I did end up reading 2 nonfiction books this month. Both of them, at least one of them I had started in January and didn't actually finish till February, but it's possible that I read both of them. I had started both of them in January. Again, I read 3 books in January, and part of that was because I read some really thick books after that, so it just took me a little while to get through. The first nonfiction book I read was Nightmare Fuel by Nina Neseth. This is a book about the science behind horror movies and why we love them so much. Even though, they're made to scare us, they have people like me have anxiety, and I love horror movies. And why horror as a genre is just so interesting to us, and again, the science behind it. I thought that this was really interesting. I don't have a lot to say about it. If you really like horror movies, if you really like science, and you're wondering why, and if you have anxiety, and you're wondering why such an anxious person loves horror so much, maybe you should check it out. I don't know. I thought it was really interesting. The next nonfiction book I read was The Woman They Could Not Silence by Kate Moore. This is the same author that wrote Radium Girls, which I read several years ago. In this book, you are following Elizabeth Packard. I can't remember her first name. Basically, this woman, her husband, did not like that she was getting so independent and so outspoken, and so he convinced a judge that she was insane, and she was put in an insane asylum. And as bad as life was at home with a husband who hates her, the life in the insane asylum was even worse. And it's just her story of how she was shoved into an asylum and no one believed her that she wasn't actually insane. And so it's the story, basically the tale of how our judicial system and the laws have changed so that women, can be judged on their own, and the world doesn't just go along with everything that her husband says. This was a super interesting book, and it made me so mad at some points, because you're like, this woman is not crazy. She's not insane. You just don't like that she's outspoken, and men suck, and they have forever apparently. And it was really, really interesting. And I love Kate Moore's writing. She has a way of writing nonfiction that almost doesn't feel like she's not preaching to you. She's not like teaching it to you in a textbook format. It flows so well. It's very easy to read, and I find her books just so interesting. The next book I read was Middle Game by Shauna McGuire. This book, I had heard about it on BookTube. I was kind of like, I don't know. And then I heard Jess Owens talk about how she never wanted to read this book, but then she did, and she's like, okay, I get the hype now. So I was like, fine, I'll pick it up. You are following, here's the reason that she doesn't want to read this book, and here's the reason that I had trouble reading this book. You're following a set, like a boy and a girl, who are not twins, but our main characters are Roger and Dodger. And so it's like, that's just, it's ridiculous. There are other pairs of characters that have rhyming names like that. I can't remember any of them now. And Dodger is all about, I think it's Dodger. She's all about like math and the mathematics side of the world. And Roger is all about, I don't know, getting people to listen to him. I can't really remember. Basically, these two people don't know each other, then they meet, and they're like, hey, we're Roger and Dodger. And it has to do with someone's trying to get them to ascend to godhood so they can basically rule the world, I think. I don't really remember a lot about it. I did not enjoy this book as much as a lot of people do. I thought that it was really long. It got a little boring. And again, I read it 2 years ago, and I don't even remember anything about it except that they're named for Roger and Dodger. The only other part that I remember is because I looked up the summary today before I filmed this video. So I do love Shauna Maguire's writing. I have read almost all of her horror books. She writes horror books under the pen name Mira Grant. And I've read almost all of those. I've also read, the only other Shauna Maguire book that I remember reading is The Wayward Children, the first one in that, Every Heart a Doorway, which I read earlier in 2020, which I read last year in 2024. I do like her writing. I couldn't get behind Middle Game. I don't really understand the hype. There is a sequel to it called Different Seasons. Never picked that up because, again, I was just kind of like meh about the first one. The next book I read was The House at the Bottom of the Lake by Josh Malerman. This is a short story, novella. It's a short little book. Josh Malerman is who wrote Bird Box and other things, but he's mostly known for Bird Box. In this, you are following two teenagers who basically like spend the day on a lake, and when they go diving into the lake, they discover there's a house at the bottom of the lake, and so they keep diving and exploring in this house. I don't really remember what else happened. Again, for being such a short book, it was kind of boring, and I don't remember a lot of it. and I don't know what else to say. It was weird. It was teenage love in the summer, exploring a house at the bottom of a lake. That's all I can say. The last book I read was The Sea Witch by Katie Robert. This is the 5th book in her Wicked Villains series. Obviously, The Sea Witch, you know that it's about Ursula and Ariel and Eric. Basically, Ariel, I don't think their names are not Ursula and Ariel and Eric, but in the book, but I can't remember their names. So Ariel, like, needs money, so she auctions herself off. No, she's trying to win back the love of the man that she loves. She auctions herself off to the Sea Witch and finds out that Eric is not the hero that she thought he was. It turns into a throuple threesome thing. This is probably one of my least favorite of her Wicked Villains books. This is also the last Wicked Villains book that I read. She has at least one more out. I just haven't read it. I like Katie Roberts' writing. I think that she writes smut and spice very well. I like that these are like fairy tale villain retellings. This one just wasn't my favorite. So looking at the 5 books that I read, I had a fairly mediocre reading month this February. Besides the 2 nonfiction books that I read that I enjoyed, the rest of them were just kind of like middle of the road meh. Again, don't even remember very much about any of them. And that's just what happens sometimes. I do know that I read books that I liked more in the upcoming months of 2023. I'm excited to talk about those, but I'm proud of myself for reading 5 books, and I'm proud of myself that 2 of them were nonfiction. That's always great. And yeah, so now I want to know, have you read any of these books? What did you think? All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.